Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Happy Election Day if you're in Virginia, New Jersey, or California. My name is David Medina, and I am the co-founder and COO of Results for America. And thanks for joining us today for our 99th session, developed in collaboration with our partners at Bloomberg Philanthropies and the U.S. Conference of Mayors. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, the Local Infrastructure Hub is a national program that connects cities and towns with the resources and expert advice that you all need to access federal infrastructure funding to drive local progress, improve communities, and deliver results for residents. And through this hub, city and town leaders like all of you have access to hands-on grant application training to secure bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act funding, hands-on grant implementation workshops, one-on-one office hours, and other actionable resources. You can sign up to learn more about all of this program and all of our resources at localinfrastructure.org. Today's session is focused on how you can work with your states to leverage the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund to access funding and financing and implementation support to improve your drinking water treatment, fix leaky or old pipes, improve water supply sources, and replace or construct finished water storage tanks. I'd now like to welcome our featured policy expert today, Cynthia Kohler, who is the Executive Director of the Water Now Alliance, a network of local leaders advancing sustainable, affordable, and resilient water strategies in their communities. Please join me in welcoming Cynthia back. Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, David. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to Results for America and the U.S. Conference of Mayors for the invitation to be with you all today to talk about the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. We have an excellent panel, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. Next slide. For those not familiar with Water Now, we are a nonprofit consultancy and a nationwide network of water leaders working to advance climate resilient, affordable, and sustainable water strategies at the community level. We've worked in partnership with the National League of Cities since our launch almost 10 years ago, and we're so pleased to have been part of the Local Infrastructure Hub, supporting both the Drinking Water and the Clean Water State Revolving Fund boot camps as subject matter experts. We are available to support your communities with questions about these funding sources, as well as how to navigate the application processes. Next slide. As most of you know, the Safe Drinking Water Act the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act together established two SRFs. Together, we'll be talking about the Drinking Water SRF, which assists public water systems in financing the cost of drinking water infrastructure projects needed to comply with the federal Safe Drinking Water Act requirements. Next slide. The Drinking Water SRF is a federal-state partnership that provides low-cost borrowing to local water systems. It's designed to create in each state a perpetual source of affordable financing for drinking water infrastructure. It's important to bear in mind that the Drinking Water SRF is, for the most part, a loan program, and other than in certain circumstances, does not provide grants. It does, however, it can provide grant-like dollars, which we'll be talking about today. The principal objective of the Drinking Water SRF is to facilitate compliance with national drinking water regulations, or otherwise to advance public health protection objectives in the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. States are required to prioritize Drinking Water SRF projects to address the most serious risks to human health, to ensure compliance with the requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act, and to assist systems most in need. So this is an interesting distinction. Unlike the Clean Water SRF, affordability is a specific purpose of the Drinking Water SRF. Next slide. So the way it works is that Congress appropriates annual funding to EPA, which allocates funds to the states. The state SRF programs then prepare intended use plans on an annual basis, laying out their priorities and processes. Utilities submit applications for SRF loans, and the SRF programs provide funds on a reimbursement basis. Next slide. The SRF programs are authorized to make loans as long as they can ensure that the interest rate for each loan is less than or at most equal to the market interest rate. The most current data available indicate that the national average for drinking water SRF loans is just under 1.5%, an incredibly good deal for ratepayers in light of municipal bond rates that have climbed to a national average of almost 4.5%. Amortized over the 30-year life of the loans, the rate impacts of these projects can be relatively low. Next slide. EPA's role in the process focuses on setting the overall direction for the SRF program. It allocates funds to the states based on a needs survey conducted every 4 years. EPA also provides guidance and oversight of the use of funding awards and general support for the states in the form of resources such as workshops or fact sheets and tools of various kinds. It also provides answers to questions about eligibility and compliance. But the primary responsibility for running the SRFs and engaging with local decision makers and applicants like yourselves occurs at the state programmatic level. The states are empowered to identify their own priorities and eligibility requirements through their intended use plans. They design and manage their respective application processes, and they are the ultimate deciders when it comes to selecting projects for funding. The states also set interest rates and lending terms. They define green projects, establish affordability criteria for disadvantaged communities, and determine how any additional subsidies are distributed to the recipients. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes on two of these issues. Next slide. You may be aware that the Clean Water SRF has a green reserve that requires states to allocate a percentage of their SRF dollars to green projects like water use efficiency or energy efficiency. The drinking water SRF did have a green reserve at one point, but is no longer required to provide a particular portion of the drinking water SRF funds to green projects. However, the states still have the authority to prioritize and fund green projects at their discretion. So these can include green infrastructure, water efficiency, and energy efficiency improvements. Next slide. Another key issue that comes up when you're thinking about applying to the drinking water SRF is that these programs the state programs are required to provide what is known as additional subsidy to address affordability concerns. The concept is that the first subsidy is the below market rates that the SRFs provide. But Congress became concerned that even these lower rates would not alleviate the substantial economic pain for lower income ratepayers associated with the costs of drinking water infrastructure loans, which of course need to be reimbursed out of rates. So the idea that of the additional subsidy is that when applying for a loan, say an expensive water treatment facility, a utility could also ask the SRF program to provide additional subsidy, which would essentially convert part of that loan into principal forgiveness, which would not need to be repaid. So effectively a grant, but for various reasons, it's called principal forgiveness instead of a grant. Because water infrastructure costs are a primary driver of rate increases, a number of commentators have noted that the additional subsidy provisions of the Safe Drinking Water Act are among the most important affordability mechanisms available to address the issue of water debt in many areas. State SRF programs can offer additional subsidy in various ways, but for practical purposes, principal forgiveness is the primary mechanism that's employed. For the most part, additional subsidy is available to disadvantaged communities, or DACs. DAC status is defined on a state-by-state basis, generally related to the level of median household income in that community. States are also authorized to provide additional subsidy for specific types of projects like system consolidations to address affordability challenges. The state SRF programs are required to provide a significant percentage of their total SRF funding from EPA as additional subsidy, and special provisions made available in the 2021 bipartisan infrastructure law made substantially more additional subsidy available, mainly for lead service line replacements and PFAS, and we'll talk more about those issues later. Those funds must be distributed as grant dollars. However, those programs are expiring in FY26. Next slide. The drinking water SRFs primarily fund capital investments that help drinking water systems achieve or maintain compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. This can include everything from treatment to water and energy conservation, service lines, resilience, system consolidation, and more. It can also cover soft costs, such as planning, design, engineering, environmental and administrative costs. Next slide. The drinking water funding is not available for certain basic operations, O&M, expenses for expansion or growth, land purchases. However, a system can request that the state evaluate whether to fund an otherwise ineligible project if it is expected to resolve a critical public health issue. Next slide. So just to give you a snapshot of what the drinking water SRFs have mainly focused on over the last 30 years, this pie chart shows that about 40% of the funds have been spent on transmission and distribution, 38% on treatment, 10% in storage, and the rest on smaller projects like source water protection and planning. Next slide. There are a few categories of eligibility that I want to focus on quickly that are worth covering. Supply reliability is a major issue, and the Drinking Water SRF supports capital project funding for drought mitigation. So this includes water efficient fixtures, either through direct purchases or consumer rebates for all consumer classes. The SRFs can also fund water management practices and equipment that use less water, as well as aquifer recharge and storage projects. States also have the option to set aside about 30% of their drinking water SRF funds to support communities with technical assistance and other capacity building drought mitigation activities. Next slide. Another key area of eligibility is replacing lead service lines. EP estimates that there are about 9.2 million lead service lines across the US that need to be replaced. And the drinking water SRFs are specifically authorized to fund lead service line identification replacements, whether on public or private properties. EPA updated the allotment formula for lead-related funding in 2023, and it now allows states with more lead lines to receive financial assistance commensurate with their needs. A key point with regard to lead lines is that partial replacements are not allowed, meaning that utilities must fund complete replacements from their mains up to the premises. And this is because partial replacements can actually result in higher levels of contamination due to disturbance of the old pipe. Drinking water SRFs can also fund initiatives associated with getting the lead out of drinking water, including lead service inventories, corrosion control strategies, monitoring, testing, and training programs. Next slide. Another area of drinking water SRF eligibility includes PFAS, also known as forever chemicals. PFAS are a particular threat to drinking water and public health because of their ability to persist in the environment over long periods of time. They're generally found in pharmaceuticals, industrial chemicals, pesticides, and microplastics. The drinking water SRFs are available to fund a long list of projects that can help communities address PFAS challenges, including treatment facilities, development of new water sources, consolidation with other systems, infrastructure related to pilot testing for treatment alternatives, or even creation of a new community water system to address unsafe drinking water. Again, states can also use or set aside part of their SRF funds for communities to lay the foundation for addressing PFAS. So that's technical assistance or pre-development activities, project planning, or other kinds of training and monitoring and analyses. Next slide. Okay, so for the most part, for the most part, SRFs are not available for the purchase of water rights. There's a specific exemption when there's a public health need or there's a need to address an imminent threat. Most critically, the purchase must be to provide water for existing populations and not for future population growth. Next slide. Drinking water SRFs are also not, for the most part, available to build new dams and reservoirs. And again, there's an exemption for public health reasons. Next slide. Okay, so you've got an eligible project. What kind of assistance can you obtain from the SRF? For the most part, as I mentioned, the SRFs are provided in the form of low interest loans that must be reimbursed. Loans cannot exceed 30 years or the useful life of the project. But it's worth noting that the SRFs can provide other forms of financial assistance as well. These include, but are not limited to, loan guarantees or insurance, refinancing options. There's also the capacity to invest short-term funds that can generate interest. And as we've discussed previously, additional subsidies to mitigate affordability issues. Next slide. Okay, so we'll spend just a couple of minutes going through some high-level steps in the drinking water SRF application process and eligibilities before turning to our panel for their success stories. Next slide. So who is eligible to apply? Basically, governmental entities such as cities, towns, and public utilities responsible for drinking water systems, but also private water companies, nonprofits, and citizens groups that have those responsibilities as well. Even very small nonprofit entities such as school or campgrounds can be eligible for drinking water SRF support of various kinds. Next slide. Eligibility turns not only on the type of entity applying, applicants must also have the technical, managerial, and financial capacity, known as TMF, to ensure that you can comply with the Safe Drinking Water Act. It's up to each state to define this more specifically for their program, but you can see on the Venn diagram some examples of what this can look like. So broadly, technical capacity refers to having the physical infrastructure to to source, treat, and distribute water. Managerial capacity refers to how the overall system is run and operated. And financial capacity refers to considerations such as credit worthiness, revenue sufficiency, and fiscal management and controls. If a potential borrower lacks one or more of the TMF capacity components, the loan will not be awarded unless the project itself will result in the borrower achieving this missing capacity. So the common gaps that we're talking about here are, non-compliance with drinking water standards, or inadequate rates, or a lack of board members, or a board's unwillingness to increase rates as needed. Many states provide technical assistance to support smaller systems in building TMF through changes in ownership, management, accounting, maintenance, or consolidation. Next slide. The other key step to get familiar with your state's SRF program. EPA has a great website that lists every state's SRF program, where you can find the agencies in your state that administer the SRF. One of the most important things you can do is get the contact information for your state's program, explore that website, and look for guidance documents, etc. Next slide. It's also very important that you review your state's intended use plans to get clear on funding priorities and their processes. You'll also want to get familiar with the specifics of your state's eligibility and application guidance. A few threshold questions may concern, does the state have an eligibility survey or an intake form or other threshold submission? Does your state accept applications on a rolling basis, or does it have specific deadlines? Next slide. While the TMF issue is generally not a big problem for larger or medium-sized utilities, it can arise for smaller communities and systems. EPA's got a lot of helpful guidance and resources that you can turn to there. Every region also has an environmental finance center, the EFCs, which can be excellent resources as well. You'll also want to consider whether your system is in significant non-compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. And you can look for this information at the Enforcement and Compliance Data database, or the Safe Drinking Water Information System on EPA's website. Next slide. You'll also want to be prepared to talk about your project's readiness. Some key issues to consider is the primary purpose to provide safe drinking water? Where are you in the design and planning process? Have you gone through environmental review? What's your budget? These and other readiness questions are usually covered in detail on your state's drinking water SRF website. Next slide. I'll close out by talking briefly about community engagement. This is an important part of the SRF process and is required on a state-by-state basis. There will typically be a requirement that the application needs to outline public participation, including meetings that are held and the dates, as well as assurances that copies of the meeting minutes are publicly available. Community engagement may represent another step in the process and be considered a bit of a burden by some communities, but it is an important element in strengthening a project's credibility and can make implementation go much more smoothly, particularly when we're talking about lead service line replacements. Next slide. Okay, so you've got here my contact information if you'd like to be in touch about any of this or explore how WaterNow might be of assistance. With that, we can stop sharing the slides, and I'll turn it back to David.
Great. Cynthia, thank you for that very comprehensive presentation. I think we're ready for you to lead our next expert panel. So if okay with you, why don't we go right to that next section?
Great. Thanks, David. We have a fantastic panel to talk about their experiences with the drinking water SRF. I'll introduce them briefly, but I'll let them talk more about their background themselves. We have Mayor Mary Lou Pauley of Issaquah, Washington, Mayor Mona Becker of Westminster, Maryland, Brian Peckinpah, the Public Affairs Director at the Detroit Water and Sewage Department, and Zachary Schaefer, Assistant Secretary for Policy at the Maryland Department of the Environment. So first, I'll ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and talk a bit about their particular project, starting with Zach. Some of you might recognize Zach from a prior local infrastructure hub on water when he was here in his capacity as an EPA staffer. So Zach, I'll just let you introduce yourself and tell us a little about your role at the Maryland Department of the Environment, and feel free to add anything I may have missed in my remarks about the program.
Well, thanks for that, Cynthia, and thanks to Results for America and NLC and the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Bloomberg for hosting all of this. I love that these conversations are continuing to happen because there still are lots and lots of federal SRF resources continuing to be available. As Cynthia shared, I'm Zach Schaefer. I'm Assistant Secretary for Policy at the Maryland Department of the Environment. In that capacity, I oversee a lot of the department's programmatic work related to water infrastructure investment, as well as compliance with relevant federal and state clean water and safe drinking water requirements and priorities. I also work on lots of air issues, land issues, contamination, PFAS, you name it. But I'll focus here on water. And as Cynthia mentioned, I did until January of this year, I served as Director of Policy in the EPA Office of Water in Washington, D.C., where I got to have the wonderful opportunity to help shape the federal guidance and the federal direction for how the bipartisan infrastructure law resources would be deployed. So those $50 billion for a host of priorities: lead, PFAS, modernization, resilience to extreme weather and other threats. So these are huge issues. We know that $50 billion is an essential down payment on that. We know it's not enough to get the entire job done. As many of you know, there are needs assessments for how much safe drinking water, how much drinking water infrastructure and clean water infrastructure is needed in this country. $50 billion gets us started. It doesn't get us finished. But it really is a tremendous opportunity to grab those resources. And I've seen in my capacity in Maryland how much of a difference that makes. We have literally hundreds of projects on our intended use plans that would not be there but for these resources, and who would have access to some funds but not enough funds to get going. And I know Dr. Becker, Mayor of Westminster, Maryland, is here to talk a bit about one of those projects in particular, which is an exciting first of its kind project for Maryland. So, just a few things to remember. From my perspective, and I know we'll get deeper into this throughout the conversation, is remember that, these dollars, are there for capital projects. They're not there for operations and maintenance. But you can design these projects to reduce operations and maintenance needs. So you can be really strategic in thinking about what are the problems that your community wants to solve and how can you solve them through these capital investments. Two, what other sources of funding do you have access to that you could couple with these funds? So in Maryland, for instance, this is just unique to Maryland, but we have other pots of state money, for instance, that can be used as non-federal match and that we combine with these resources to help make the funds more accessible for communities. And the third piece is technical assistance. We know that there's a lot of communities out there who've never accessed SRF funds. This was one of the things that kind of shocked me when I got to EPA and was learning more about how the SRFs actually work in practice. Very few communities historically had actually even attempted to apply for SRF funding. And I know that's one of the things that webinars and programs like this are really trying to change. And I do believe that the influx of resources from the bipartisan infrastructure law brought, just naturally, it created a center of gravity. It brought a lot of interest from communities who might not have even known that the funds existed, let alone tried to navigate the process. But even then, we know that it takes a lot of expertise, time, and support to navigate the application process for any federal grant of the SRF or loan, and the SRF program is no different. And so, for those communities who never have done this or have never done it successfully, it may be critical to get some advice and some help. And that's why I'm really glad that EPA, when I was there, we stood up first of its kind technical assistance programs to provide that technical and financial and managerial support that Cynthia talked about is so important. That those resources continue to be available to communities who need that help. And we at the state level also try to both provide that support or connect communities with those technical assistance providers. So, my advice would be, don't be afraid to get started. Don't be afraid to reach out to the contacts and the list that Cynthia put up on the screen from EPA. And don't be afraid to just start gathering more information, because this is a navigable process. It's not to say that it's easy, but it is a really, really valuable tool to have in your tool belt as a local leader in solving some of the most pressing challenges for your community.
Thanks so much, Zach. Since we've been talking about Maryland, let's turn to Mayor Becker to tell us a bit about Westminster and your project there. I understand it's a recycling project that you were able to get SRF support for.
Yes. So in 2002, the city of Westminster ran out of water. Our reservoir, we were in the midst of an extreme drought. Our reservoir had gone completely dry, and we were forced to bring water in from Baltimore, from Liberty Reservoir in trucks. At that time, after that time, Westminster was under a consent decree from the state of Maryland, where we're very sort of strictly allocated in how we can spend our water or how we can allocate our water for businesses. And so we've been operating under this consent decree for just about 25 years. And I always explain, to individuals, water is the hamstring, or not the hamstring, is the Achilles tendon, right, of Westminster. It really inhibits our economic growth and what we're doing to look for the future. So in 2017, we started to pursue a water recycling facility. And so this has been in the works, at least the plans behind the scene, gathering support for a water recycling facility for at least the last 8 or 9 years. I'm pleased to say that we have broken ground on the facility, but we are in the midst of building the state of Maryland's first water reuse facility. It is called Pure Water Westminster. It will divert effluent from our sewage treatment plant into basically a small water drinking plant, and it will be treated to drinking water standards. There was a little bit uncomfortableness with us directly piping this to the communities, and that can be a hard sell sometimes, sort of PR wise. And so we will be sending this water to mix with the water in our reservoir, and then it will be taken or pumped out into the community after it goes through our drinking water plant again. We're going to start with 500,000 gallons. We're building a plant that is capable of treating 1 million gallons, and hopefully we will get there. But our existing permit is for 500,000 gallons. We spent a lot of time with the legislature over the last several years writing the legislation to enable us to build this plant. When we approached the General Assembly and we approached MDE, no plant like this exists in Maryland. And so we sort of had to build the legwork for everything as we were going through the design and the plan process, which meant quite a bit of time testifying in front of the state legislature in Annapolis, and rounding up support from our own delegation in Carroll County and other elected officials within the State House. But I'm pleased to say we've been working really hard on community buy-in. I know that's one of the things that hopefully if anyone has questions about that a little bit later, I'm happy to address questions for community buy-in. And we have had very, very little community pushback on the fact of purifying effluent from a wastewater treatment plant and then using that as drinking water. But yeah, I'd be happy to talk about our project as we go in through the session.
Well, it's a fantastic story, Mayor. Thank you for sharing. Can you maybe spend just like a minute on the SRF role here? How was that program, the Drinking Water SRF program, able to support you with moving this project forward?
So this project, thankfully, for that money, it was just fantastic. This project turned out to balloon quite a bit in price, as most projects have done over the last several years. And so we were able to use the funds towards some design plans and towards some facilities plans. And now that we've broken ground, we're looking at having the plant established by 2027.
Excellent. So moving to you, Mayor Pauley, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the SRF project that you've been working on in Issaquah?
Yes, thank you, Cynthia. It's nice to be here today. My name is Mary Lee Pauley. I'm the mayor of the city of Issaquah, which is a town of 40,000, just 15 miles inland east of Seattle. And we have completed a project, so I'd like to give you a few details about that. The project we constructed was a 3,000 gallon per minute water booster pump station and approximately 8,000 lineal feet of 12-inch transmission line between our valley floor in one of our neighborhoods up on the hills, Issaquah Highlands. The construction cost was approximately $7.6 million. And while we did have a very healthy city water fund balance, we determined that it was inadequate to fund a project of this size without our city issuing debt. So the project it's constructed and ended up providing system reliability portion of the city that lives up on the hillsides. And presently on this particular neighborhood, there's only 2 vehicle access routes and historically only 1 source for water along this steep hillside. So this project provided system seismic resiliency in providing a second redundant water supply to this community. And the project also allows us to move forward with a future project, which is a new 2.5 million gallon reservoir on the site. If our growth projections prove out to be true, we'll be welcoming. We've grown 500% in 30 years, and we're expecting to grow by at least another 10,000 over the next 20 years. And this allows us to move ahead with the reservoir project if needed. So through the rotating fund, the city received $5 million 20-year loan from the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund with an interest rate of 1.75%. So for us, this made a project that looked like it might not pencil out or it might have to be delayed, actually get completed. In the state in general, the 3 things that were kind of concerns right now with these is that the needs in all the communities in Washington state vastly outstrips the availability of funding. We still feel that there is more funding needed in order to get these important projects done. And unfunded mandates that that demand a diversity of funding resources like local, state, and federal resources make the work of trying to finance a project much more complicated. And probably somebody will mention this at least once or twice today, affordability. You know, our utility rates have gone up 25% in 5 years. And we're hearing about, you know, all the areas of affordability, but utility rates are also one that is making it much more unaffordable to live here. So thank you for inviting me. I am on the Mayor's Water Council for the U.S. Conference of Mayors and interested in any questions you might have.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We will get to those for sure. Brian, please introduce yourself and tell us about Detroit's very ambitious program to replace 80,000 lead lines in the next 10 years. I think with part of that with the support of the SRF.
Good afternoon. I'd be happy to share. So thank you very much for hosting this very robust conversation. I'm Brian Peckapaw. I'm the Public Affairs Director for the Detroit Water and Sewage Department. We are the largest municipal water utility in the state of Michigan and do have 80,000 lead service lines. And what we decided to do after the Flint water crisis in 2015 is that we wanted to build a program that ensured we would not lose the trust in our clean drinking water system. Because once you lose that trust, it's very hard to gain it back. So we built a lead service line replacement program that's actually integrated within our department, where it's part of our CFO's job, it's part of our engineer's job, it's part of our public affairs job description to implement and support a lead service line replacement program. Rather than having that dedicated team, we integrated it within our department so that we can scale up and scale back depending on funding. And we've been very fortunate with our relationship with the EPA and EGLE, which is our Michigan version of the EPA, to have secured about $85 million in SRF funding specific to lead service line replacement. And while we could just have essentially contracted that out, replace lead lines with that funding, we took a different approach. We wanted to use that momentum that the SRF funding provided in order to expand contractor capacity so that we could scale up and increase the rapid replacement of lead service line replacement. From 2018 up to 2023, where we were replacing about 700 lead lines per year. This money allowed us to start replacing 3,500 or more a year. So a big jump in replacement in a 12-month period. So we decided to use the funding as a momentum to increase contractor capacity. So we went from 3 contractors for lead service line replacement to 7. We also, our mayor challenged us, Mayor Mike Duggan of Detroit challenged us to hire employee crews to replace lead service lines. he had this innovative idea that if the employees compete with contractors, we'll drive the price down, which will maximize the SRF funding. So he was right. Initially, we had a $13,000 per house cost for lead service line replacement. We were able to drive that down to $9,300 per house, which allows us to take that $85 million and replace 8 to 10,000 lines per year going forward and hit that 10-year mark. So we did that, and then we used the funding. We got approval from the state to not only use the funding for actual replacement, but also to start up our employee crews. So we were able to buy equipment specific for lead service line replacement using the SRF funding. And we were able to move up existing employees who already were doing water main system upgrades or repairs into this new program, and then backfill and hire those empty positions that they emptied by moving up to the lead service line replacement program. So then because we have 80,000 lead lines, the next step was to decide, where do we start? So we took data, layers and layers of data using ArcGIS to use census data, government census data, household data, occupancy, age of housing stock, and then that's how we prioritize where are the areas we were going to go to first. And because we were using SRF funding with principal loan forgiveness, we started with the most vulnerable areas of the city for this lead service line replacement program. So looking forward to the conversation and answering any questions that you may have today about our program here in Detroit.
That's just an amazing success story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Zach, moving back to you, can you talk to us a bit about what Maryland's application process looks like for the drinking water SRF? Specifically, are there any steps in the process that you found can be tricky for local governments, any pitfalls that you'd advise to avoid?
It's a great question. So the process looks, I think it looks fairly similar across the country. So, for Maryland and for any other country, there's a lot of federally required pieces to the application process, and EPA does review, conduct oversight over the program. So the process will look like there will be an opening to apply. For Maryland, that's from early December to late January. It may be a slightly different period for other states, but generally there's an open application period. You'll have to get in all of the materials to have a complete application. I'll come back to that in a second, but then Maryland will take all of those applications in. We will review them for completeness. We will put the list of projects, we will score them, and there's prioritization or scoring criteria, as Cynthia alluded to, that we will rank and score each project based on a variety of factors, including what the needs are. Does it meet compliance needs for a community to meet its Clean Water Act or Safe Drinking Water Act statutory requirements or other state requirements? Is it serving a disadvantaged community? There are certain priority areas in the state of Maryland, for instance, where we're working to ensure that we're investing. We're also going to be looking at things like the financial stability of the applicant to make sure that if this is in fact a loan, and there is some principal forgiveness, which are not exactly grants but function like grants, but where this is a loan, we need to ensure that there is going to be the ability to repay that loan. And so we'll go through a whole bunch of analysis to determine, make sure every applicant is eligible, that the application is complete, score them. We'll put out a draft intended use plan for public comment. And that's a touch point at which the community and others, other interested stakeholders can provide feedback on the proposed use that the state is recommending for those funds. After that, we'll finalize it and send it to EPA for approval. A few things to think about in that process is, when you're thinking about applying, this isn't something that can be done the night before. This is something that requires a lot of advanced planning and organizing, gathering of materials. For instance, like I mentioned, the fiscal stability of the applicant is a factor. So having financial audits over the last several years on hand is something that EPA will look for when they provide oversight to us as the states, as the lending entity. So if you don't have an audit, that's something that you'll need to do, you'll need to track those down. So making sure that you really have put a lot of work into understanding what needs to go into the application and have provided all of those materials. And that's something where, again, those technical assistance providers who provide that technical or financial or managerial assistance to help you get started can help play a role in making sure that you start early enough, don't miss certain materials or steps which could either delay you or cause your application to be thrown out in that round because it's not complete. Another factor to think about is, are you ready to apply? Like there's, starting your application too quickly can be a problem, because you might not be able to get it all done. But also, even if you can, are you actually ready to use those resources? A lot of these projects have long lead times. They're complex. They may require multiple funding streams. Make sure that you're ready to go, because if you apply for a loan and say you even receive it, if you then sit on that, if you sit on those encumbered funds, they're not serving you. They're not serving another potential water system in your state that could be using those funds. They're losing value due to inflation, and they're not getting repaid into the state's revolving fund so that in the future there are even more dollars to loan to you or to another system. So we do actually, and EPA reviews the health of our fund. And one of the things they look at is how long have funds been encumbered but not used by a community. And they may tell us, you know what, you really need to take those funds back. So that doesn't help anybody. We don't want to be in the position of taking those funds back. And of course, a community could apply again in the future. So one of the things to think hard about is the timing of like making sure you leave enough time to apply, but make sure that you really are actually ready to apply, not just apply for, but ready to use those dollars. It doesn't need to be shovel ready. It doesn't need to be ready to go the moment you get those dollars, but it does need to be relatively ready to go. The last thing I'll just reinforce is that this is a reimbursement program. These are not upfront capital dollars. These are dollars that EPA or that the departments, that the state will reimburse to your system after, in stages as you spend it. And so there does have to be some other source of revenue or source of capital up front to provide that, to provide the working capital to deliver the project in the first place. And we know that that can be a barrier for some communities. That doesn't mean you're ruled out. There's, again, there can be ways to combine it with other sources of funding, to look at other parts of the capital market, and know that the SRF loan is going to be there and be a piece of your package. But that is something else to consider. So I'll leave it at that and turn it back to you.
Thanks. And just to underscore one of Brian's really important points, there are a lot of organizations, Water Now is one, there's others that are available to help communities apply for these loans on a pro bono basis, just to help you navigate the process and figure it all out. So for our city representatives, let's talk a little bit about the application process and what that looked like for each of you. So for example, how long did it take from submission of your pre-application or letter of interest to closing on the loan? Any issues with documentation that your team needed to prepare? And Mayor Becker, let's start with you.
There we go. We, like Zach was saying, we were very lucky from the standpoint, we had all of our ducks in a row before we went into this. We knew what the cost of the project was. We had all of our background paperwork in hand. And we felt very comfortable when we were going in, and, like you said, our project wasn't shovel ready when we did apply for the loan. But it was actually, as far as loans go, it was a short turnaround. Within a year, we had put our application in. We had followed up with that, and we had received confirmation that we were going to be eligible for the loan, again, which we are incredibly grateful for. And so I think, that key point that he was talking about is that, have your municipality ready to apply for this, and get those ducks in a row. I will say I am very blessed with an incredibly strong city administrator who played an important role in this as well. And she had worked with these sorts of loans before, and so it was a very straightforward process for us to go through that. And I'm sure we would be happy to share with other communities as they navigate these processes as well.
Excellent. Mayor Polly, how would you describe your experience working through the drinking water SRF application process in Washington? I've heard good things.
I'll piggyback on what Mayor Becker said. Anyone who's involved in water system planning knows that some of these projects have 10-year and longer deadlines. They are planning horizons. They stay on your capital improvement plan for quite a while. I was elected 12 years ago, and this booster station project was on there. But at that time, I was on council and not in the mayor's chair. And so for the operational side of how long it took, I don't have an answer for you today. I do know that it was the first time we applied for it, and again, I'll give credit to a strong administrator at the time, that they are excited about having the booster station finished, but also they have another project on the list, this large reservoir that I was talking about, and this is a funding source that they would like to go back to again. So they had a very good experience in Washington State, and it really helped us to actually even move this project forward. So I don't have anything more specific. You know, these projects, these timelines, unless it's an like Mayor Becker had, decade-long planning cycles to actually get them ready to, you know, shovel in the ground, let's get going kind of status.
Got it. And Brian, same question for you. How would you describe your experience working through things with the Michigan SRF? It sounds like it was very fast.
It was fast, but very similar experiences with Mayor Polly and Mayor Becker, as well as what Zach shared, and that really water utilities and municipalities have to be patient, have to have a program and a plan in place. We knew in 2018, once we launched our lead service line replacement program, how many lead service lines we needed to replace. And we had to build up that program and be very patient for the right time to get that SRF funding very quickly. So when the time came in 2022 is when we got the $85 million. We were ready to go with a program already baked in and a plan to go, community engagement already in place. And so our SRF planning and the documentation that's necessary is it's a very big lift, and there has to be public meetings and a public notice in the local newspaper. So it involves not only the administrator of the municipality or the water department, the utility. It also involves the communications staff, engineering staff, to make sure everything's in order, because you don't want to have any hiccups when that plan is submitted to the state to ensure that the funding gets secured and is released. So it was very rapid, but we had a program in place to move very quickly and to scale up once we got the funding.
It's fantastic that you all had such positive experiences. Zach, turning back to you, because we're going to wrap up here in just a couple of minutes. Could you tell us a little bit about any guidance or changes to the drinking water SRF at the federal level that you've seen this year that cities should be aware of? You're on mute for some reason. We cannot hear you.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay.
There really have not been major changes to the state revolving fund program, from the federal level in the last, since the change of the administration, for instance. There is more scrutiny certainly on certain factors, ensuring that it's a more technical application that justifies, the benefits and the need. Is definitely something that cities should pay attention to in their applications. One of the things that I would say, and that this is not an advocacy plug, but just that one of the big, the best thing that that cities could gain from the next few years is to have the bipartisan infrastructure law, IIJA, injection of additional capital continue at those levels, because I think, as we all talked about, Mayor Polly, you mentioned this too, the need outstrips the available supply of dollars. I know that when I was reviewing Maryland's intended use plan for 2025, we had about $2.5 billion in applications in our state alone for about $400 million in available funding. That's across both the regular state revolving fund that we have, as well as the additional temporary injection of funding through the IIJA. And so, so it's already not meeting demand. And so I think it's really crucial that the water sector, local governments, counties, everybody demonstrate how they're using these dollars, if they've used them over the past few years, or like really tell the story of these investments. And also, if you haven't, talk about your need and talk about that need with decision makers in Washington, because there is appetite for extending that investment. I mean, this is a bipartisan issue, but legislators can't do what people don't ask them to do, and asking sometimes needs to be screaming and hand waving and saying, please, dear God, make sure that these funds continue to roll out. So I would just put that bug in everybody's ear to say to be vocal about the value that these dollars generate, be vocal about the level of need in your states and in your communities, so that more communities, and yourselves included, have an opportunity to continue to access these dollars. I mean, I'm sure, Dr. Becker, that this is one great project, and there's probably 10 more that you and Sarah have on your list of things you'd like to get to. So, it's just because you've gotten, one SRF loan doesn't mean we don't want you to be a repeat customer. We want repeat customers, we want new customers, and we want the dollars to service them.
Excellent. So I want to end our time together by asking each of the municipal representatives here, other than the readiness issues we've talked about today, what last nugget of advice do you have for other cities interested in accessing their drinking water SRF? Let's start with Mayor Polly.
So I think you've done an outstanding job today in the chat, providing information for folks to find out how to learn about their program. I'm a former public works engineer, so I'm the kind of mayor who geeks out on this stuff. I did, prior to this, preparation for this session today, reach out and talk with our program manager in Washington State so I could get the bigger picture. And, it was pretty easy to get the contact. It was pretty easy to set up a 30-minute phone call to talk about not only our use of the funds, but across the state, what is going on. So I think there's resources in here in the chat. I think you've done a fantastic job. I really appreciate you pulling us all together, letting us share these stories, but also helping people connect with those that can help them get the loans.
Thank you. Brian, last nuggets?
Yeah, so alluding to what Zach said a moment ago is that relationships matter. So while cities and municipalities, you submit several plans, and you hope that the state reviews it and approves it based on the viability of the plan. But relationships do matter, and making sure that the administrator and the mayor and council also reach out to the state staff and make sure that they socialize them on the SRF application, let them know why, the reasoning behind it, so that can be part of the conversation. Those things do make a difference and help the viability of the application as well when you submit that to SRF resources.
Excellent. And Mayor Becker, we'll let you have the last word. Any nuggets of advice?
I would emphasize again about the relationships. I know when we were applying for our SRFs and following it through, there was constant communication between the city of Westminster and the state of Maryland as we were, sort of pursuing that money. The council and mayor were involved in that as well, but definitely the lines of communication stayed open between us and the state. And I think that was one of the really powerful things that helped us achieve our goals in the end.
Fabulous. And I am seeing there was one question that I want to answer quickly about, this is a little technical, about project area boundaries. And this might be one we need to take offline, but my understanding is that the SRFs don't have particular restrictions on how you want to define your project. That might be a state by state issue. But anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge that came up, but it should not be. The SRF programs generally do not have require strict adherence to track boundaries, limiting the scope of projects. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. With that, I want to thank the panel and turn things back over to David.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. Thanks to our speakers. Thanks to everyone who joined us today. Before you depart, we hope that you'll fill out our online Zoom poll, which will appear on your screen any moment right now. And we have two quick announcements. One is that you can find a link to Cynthia's presentation in the chat. And we'll also be posting it on our website, localinfrastructure.org. And if you're interested in learning more about the WSRF and the CWSRF, keep an eye out for an upcoming workshop that we'll be hosting on those topics early next year. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.